Um, who's here? Joanne's here. Say
Here.
yes. At least nod your head. Ken, nod your head, please.
Present.
Yeah. Mary?
Here.
Jack?
Present.
Anybody else here? Steve here?
Steve was here.
Is Steve.
Here. Here.
All right. So I'm calling the meeting open, and we officially have a quorum.
And pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 23, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Yarmouth Community and Economic Development Committee meeting is being conducted via remote participation. All votes during this meeting will need to be conducted by roll call. No in-person attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Public participation will be permitted by allowing members of the public to join this meeting via Zoom or via telephone, and comments may also be sent in by email to kpedicini@yarmouth.ma.us.
Excellent.
I'll pull up the budget.
Yep.
All righty. So can everyone see the budget?
Yes.
Yes.
So after making all the transfers and everything, you guys have currently for 2020, a little over 60,000 available and unallocated, and a little over 91,000 in public improvement expenses. You also have 4 public improvement projects that you allocated money for, but there's no contract for the projects. So for instance, the signage project you guys had allocated 27 grand for, but we don't really have a set you guys just allocated the money for that. We don't really have a set project for that.
Yep.
So those are funds to consider as well. You could always turn those back if you'd like to put off those projects to have more funds. So we have added in the allocation that is to be voted at town meeting. And then we set aside 150,000 for supplemental town funding, so you could see how that would impact your 2021 budget. After doing the allocations and allocating 90,000 for marketing as well for 6 months of that contract, you would have a little over 167,000 for public improvement expenses available, and a little over 97,000 available and unallocated. So that unallocated is obviously usually where you guys pull the special events funding from. So if you wanted to do 100,000 again this year, you would need to take, do what I was saying, maybe you could turn back some of the physical improvement projects that have been allocated, but aren't really in the queue yet, so to speak. So it's kind of for you guys to consider. I don't know, Karen, if you want to add anything.
No, I think Kyle just saying, turn back the public improvements. We do need to be careful to keep minimum 20% in that bucket.
Right.
So we'd have to double check our math kind of from date of inception to just confirm that we haven't allocated something less than the 20%. In terms of other spending, so, Rich is unfortunately not able to join us. We've put a placeholder in there, Kyle mentioned, of $150,000. That was the number that Rich had brought up at the last meeting. I think that the approach with this, and there is a budget presentation tonight at the Board of Selectmen. I think that, I can't speak for Rich. I think they're taking a very good hard look at the budget and trying to be conservative where they need to be. I think they're hoping not to tap into this $150,000. It's not directly called out in the presentation. They've kind of softened the approach a bit, but that said, I think that it's still very early on in the budget process. They're also meeting with the schools tonight, for instance. So I think that the ask and it's more of a conversation. And what Kyle and I tried to do with the budget is just to illustrate the very broad spending categories, how you can allocate some funding towards those in 2021, and perhaps leave alone the $150,000 should it be needed, just for planning purposes, really. The only other point that I'd make, and Kyle, I didn't get a chance to bring it up, we have talked with Jeff Colby about the beautification team. We're holding off right now. It's our understanding that the beautification team is in the DPW budget. That said, we're taking a good hard look at any hiring that the town is doing. Not sure how it's going to go. I'm not sure whether hiring people in those roles would be, perceived any different if the funding source were different, if it was coming out of tourism rather than a kind of general fund. But I just wanted to bring that up. I think it has been a successful program. I think it's one, my experience with the committee, that the committee's been pleased with, that it is impactful, and it's a really nice kind of community add out of the program funding. But this budget does not reflect that beautification team. So that would be a new allocation that you'd need to find the money for. And like Kyle has illustrated, you have that money well within the physical improvements or public improvements category.
Karen, one of the things that we were told last time was, and I emphasized the public improvements and recreation improved the town and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told that he could make sure that these monies could be directed towards physical improvement, so we would know that they were going there, so we weren't violating anything. I also asked for an opinion from the town attorney to make sure we could in fact do this.
Mm-hmm. I know that the request was made to the town council. I'm not sure what the status is on the response, if they got a response. It went out to town council through the town administrator's office.
Right.
It certainly, Peter, it certainly seems to me that the money spent on the beautification team should certainly go towards physical improvement. I mean,
That's how we've always charged it in the past.
Okay.
And for my, the beautification should be done, because we're going to need, as I said last time, we're going to need to look as pretty as possible this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Is there some reason we don't identify it as a line item on this budget?
It's an oversight, Joanne. It was just an oversight. And we had gone back and forth with Jeff on the request. And, probably 6 months ago, we were hoping, I don't know how many times off the top of my head CEDC has funded the beautification team. I want to, it's at least 2, maybe 3, guys?
Three times, Karen.
Yeah, I think I said 3 times.
So it's something that's always been funded through this tourism fund. I think that the committee and Jeff as well, we're hoping to be able to fold it into the DPW operating budget.
I see.
And so that's why it came off of, we dialogued with Jeff and agreed that we'd hold off because it was in the DPW budget. But, I'm just giving a kind of heads up that it could be back. But.
And how much do we fund it for?
I think it's been 25 or 20 in the past. Kyle, do you know off the top of your head? I can look.
It's been, I think it started at 20 and went up to 25 with equipment.
Last couple of years, it's been 20.
20?
Yep.
And so what line, where is that 20 located in the 2020 revised budget?
So it's
Oh,
not,
go ahead, Kyle.
it's not a line item because you guys haven't officially voted it as a project. Karen was just kind of telling you it as an FYI to keep in mind.
Where would it come out of?
It would come out of public improvement expense.
The 91,000.
Correct.
Correct.
So it's in there.
If you choose to, if you vote the project, it would come out of there.
So just to follow up, we won't know until Jeff's budget is approved by the town, correct?
That's correct.
Which is in
Okay.
You know,
June.
you know, on it, the budget conversation is really incredibly dynamic right now. So there's a item tonight on the selectmen to discuss the budget. There's a public hearing scheduled on, I think it's June 2nd.
Yep.
For the, I'm gonna have to close my window. And then it would go to town meeting, Steve, which is still currently scheduled, I believe, for the 22nd of June.
Okay. All right.
Noisy here at Town Hall.
Peter, what are your thoughts?
My thought is we should support the town budget as much as possible while keeping back stuff, obviously stuff we've already committed to.
Right.
You know, the chamber, if we could keep the 100 grand for events, that would be great. And
There's not enough money if we keep 100 grand for events plus the chamber plus the 150.
You could almost do it. You got
Al-
98
Almost.
right now. No, you got 98 right now. You could shift, like I said, you could shift some of the, like Karen said, we'd have to double check some of the math, but you could maybe turn back a couple of the physical improvement projects to get up to 100 grand if you wanted.
well,
Oh.
drive-in site improvements is,
That's only 150 bucks, right?
Yeah, so that you allocated 10,000 for, but we have an encumbrance of 9,850, hence the 150 bucks.
okay. That's enough to buy a couple of six packs and that's about
Yeah,
it.
right.
Okay, the signage project, we've got some of this allocated, right? For the signage?
You got $27,675 allocated for signage. The issue with signage is that the project was kind of stopped in its tracks before COVID, and now with COVID, it's definitely stopped in its tracks. We're trying to finalize the designs before we proceed with it.
And it,
I have a broad process question, since this is my first kind of rollover period where we're rolling from one budget year to the next. Do we typically roll over projects such as signage, fencing, packet landing,
They have
Where
in the
there have been
past,
no-
Brian.
where there have been no expenditures? Why wouldn't, unless there's been some commitments made, I don't know about the packet landing maintenance, but why wouldn't they just fall into the new pot that we have to consider and set priorities for in 21?
we don't have to spend it, and it doesn't, and we can, if we're trying to save money to do a particular project, we can save it over a couple of fiscal years, which is what we did, frankly, for when we did the project at Packet Landing. And again, that wasn't just us, that was a whole bunch of other folks, but we saved our money for at least 2 fiscal years so we could fund Packet Landing to the amount that we wanted.
Okay.
I do think, Joanne, your question is relevant, and I think the committee, you know, it's the beauty of this fund is that the lump sum is appropriated, and then it's up to the committee to do the allocations. And to the extent that it's flexible, it is flexible, subject to the committee. And really, the only real requirement is that you have 20% minimum set aside for the public improvements. Other than that, you can move money around.
I guess my question is really one where would we have to justify, if when we look at the priority listing for next year for projects in that listing, that fencing improvements, whatever's left, might fall out, or the signage project. And then we're in an explanation mode as to why we're saying no to them. Just not, again, it's just I'm asking from an understanding point of view, why have line item identifiers on projects if we're not sure that they're a go?
Um,
And it's
I
just those
understand-
3 examples.
Right, I understand your question. You know, the packet landing maintenance, that one, we've agreed to, this is to, you know, keep the site clean, make sure there's toilet papers in the bathroom and that kind of stuff. So that was committed a long time ago, and that's why it, you know, it was 0 last year, but it's our nickel coming up.
Right.
Okay.
On the fencing, we've done a bunch of fencing. And if we've signed contracts, we obviously can't undo those contracts. The lights at Parker's River Bridge, we've committed $55,000 for that, but there's no contract signed for that, that we've committed that when the bridge is done, that money will be available. So Karen, my question is that committed or not committed?
My understanding is that $55,000 is encumbered into a contract, Peter.
Okay.
So it's the other way around. So anything in the encumbrance column,
Yeah.
we do have a contract for. Anything in the available is, it's a softer allocation, if you will. I mean, those are the terms I always use, is just town meeting appropriates, the committee allocates. You know, I think these are the programs that the committee has discussed and they voted.
So really, it comes down to the 36,000, Peter, the signage project and the fencing improvement that we could move into, you know, the unallocated amount right at this moment. Because hearing you correctly, the 4,400 for Packet Landing, that was a handshake agreement that we would take that on. And I think we should live to that agreement.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't have a problem at all based on what the town's facing, moving, you know, for right now, moving that money off, you know, off this line item to the unencumbered. Then it's just a matter of all of us deciding on what's the right thing to do. You know, to fully fund the 150, to partially fund it. You know, I think we're gonna have a hard time defending ourselves with this money sitting here unencumbered if the town's struggling for cash right at the moment, and defending what we're trying to do here if the town's in dire straits financially at this, you know, for a short-term period, what we've been going through. So
I think the only thing, I keep making my pitch for the 20%.
I think the 20% should sit in there.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure out what that number is,
Okay, thank you.
and then come back with what's available after the 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And you know, just one note, the 150,000 is going to be used to pay for a lot of physical improvement type of activities.
Yep.
Like, it's going to be used. So
Yeah.
I guess I would say I'm not as concerned about the 20% thing, because if you say you take the 27 grand out of the signage project and you put that to the 150, it's still basically a physical improvement expense.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What's it going to be used for? Do you have any idea, Kyle?
Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's mostly salaries for people who do tourism related work. So
I think it could be salaries. It's also, you know, I think it could be beach funding. It could be golf funding
Okay.
that are, you know, somehow tied to tourism is the thought process.
Okay.
So Kyle, if we move that 27,675, the 8,678, left 20% in the town improvement column, I'll call it, and made sure that we live to our commitment with the chamber, which to me is vitally important too. You have to market the town.
yeah.
You have a ballpark number of what's going to be left there after those moving in and moving out?
So if you turn back the signage and fencing improvement, basically,
Right, yep,
and you want to know what your unallocated would be after that?
well, plus we gotta make sure we left 20% in the column.
in for the chamber.
And also make sure we fund what we committed to with the chamber,
Yeah, so,
because that's an 18-month contract, correct?
correct.
Correct.
All right, so if you turn back the signage and the fencing improvement, that's a little over, I think it was 36 grand or something like that.
Roughly, yep.
And you added that to your unallocated, the projected total for 2021. So that that delineates the 90,000 for the chamber for the marketing, and then it's a 20% allocation for public improvement. That's already subtracted out of that. That
Right.
would leave your unallocated at $134,339.91.
I'm sorry, Kyle, what was that number again, please?
$134,339.91.
So if we rounded it to 125, now the other issue, of course, that's coming up is, you know, if we say, okay, fine, you guys can have 125,000. We need to know what our budget's going to be for next year, and that doesn't get voted till town meeting. And, you know, we could get nicked at town meeting.
Your 20
Allocation.
appropriation?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a formula. I mean, I have to guess that we've had this understanding correctly. We'll get confirmation from town council, but it's a legislated item. I don't think you can deviate from it. I think the only thing that was ever deviated was that $50,000 subject to appropriation.
that's right. Okay. No, you're right. You're right. I
I think the 50 was discretionary,
yeah.
but the other is formulaic. We'll get confirmation from town council, but
I believe that's to be the case.
I feel pretty confident about that.
Could I ask a question? I'm talking about the public improvement funds, 20%. The money we're looking at here on the spreadsheet, is any of that from previous years that has to be held on to for public improvements anyway? Or?
It isn't that all the money rolls forward, Jack?
Yeah,
I think that what we have to do, I know I did an accounting of it a couple of years ago to make sure we were kind of staying true to it.
Yeah.
The 20%, we have to go back and basically look at the, this is what I think the math is that we look at the sum total of all the appropriations that have occurred. What's 20% of that? What have we spent that could be a physical improvement? And what do we have budgeted for physical improvements? And then if there's anything left over, then that's what you can reallocate to a different category.
right. That was part of my question. I know that in certain years we have not spent the full 20%.
Right.
Right.
We bring that forward, so
And I
I'm still committed to be public improvements regardless.
Yeah, and that's why we moved a few years ago. When we first started, we didn't have the kind of preset categories that are shown at the top of the budget. And that's one of the reasons why we did this, so that we could, make a deposit annually of
Right.
20% to kind of squirrel it away
Right.
in the public improvements so that we didn't spend it on other things.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah, I know the 50%, I mean, the 50,000 is a couple of years they'll skip that anyway, and I'm sure they'll skip it this year.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna get
Oh,
it.
it's not in there this year.
All right,
Keep track.
because the formula, I know it's formulaic, but it's also been projected forward. Obviously, that's redundant. So what are they going to do for projections for this, for fiscal year July through next June, which is where our money's going to come from? Have they done a projection for that?
No, I think that the 379 is based on the revenue estimate for the prior year.
Yeah.
And so it's your 2022 appropriation that will be considerably smaller because of the receipts being so hard hit.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, I rounded it down to 125. And if the beautification team is not going to be part of the DPW, you know, I think we should hold back 20 for that. Because again, that's my personal opinion. I think it's extremely important that be taken care of this year.
That would come out of your public improvement expense, of which you guys certainly have enough funding for 20,000.
Anybody else's thoughts on that?
Yeah, Peter, excuse me, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Well, you know, we should at least hold that money back for the beautification team. If the DPW doesn't get the funding, then we should step in and fund it, as long as we can, you know, staff it. If there's an issue with staffing because of proximity to each other or whatever. But I know the DPW is out working every day, so, you know, so I don't see how that staffing could be an issue, so.
Yeah, we can always come back and revisit this in July
Yeah,
once the town approves the budget for FY '21.
well, that's if town meeting happens in July, you know?
And even the beautification team has historically started sooner than that.
They started
Yeah.
mid-May last year,
They
I
start
think.
around now. I mean, they usually have things fixed up for Memorial Day for
Right.
the ceremonies.
Yep.
And the kids are definitely home from college, right? So,
Right. Yep. So,
Where you get
well,
into,
it's Peter, it sounds like we have a ton of stuff on the floor. Should we take these as one, you know, one line item or one vote as each individual piece?
Ken, I think that makes good sense. Because again, there's a lot of moving parts, and I don't want anybody to be more confused than me.
Well, I mean, I'll start it off by the first one being an easy one, saying that I'd like to make a motion to unencumber the money, or, well, it's not encumbered, but reallocate is the better way to put it, the money from the signage project of $27,675 and the fencing improvement project of $8,678.50, and move that back into unallocated funds for the 2021 budget.
I take that as a motion.
Second.
There's a motion. Steve made a second. Any further questions on that? Hearing none. All in favor? And again, we're going to do this by roll call, and I'm looking at Steve first.
Aye. Yes.
Ken,
Yes,
Jack,
Yes,
Joanne,
Yes.
Mary, you still there?
yes.
Who did I miss?
Yourself.
yourself.
I vote in favor. I have a question on the $150. Does that need to be there, or is that done?
Well, we haven't gone through the contract with them, like the project hasn't been completed.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, just leave the 150 there. I was just thinking if that were done, we might as well clean that line item up. But
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing at some point you probably turn that back, but you might want to leave it until the project.
okay, so with the 27,675 and the 86,7850 added to the 91,592.10 is approximately 136,000.
No, you put that in unallocated. So
Unallocated, that goes to
gonna
the
be-
60.
Yeah, it goes
Oh,
to
I'm
the
sorry,
60.
into the 60, excuse me. I
Added with
apologize.
projected allocation will be a little over 134. I
Right.
think is what it was.
Do you want to commit the 134 to the town? I hear
I,
no,
I would go with, Peter, I would go with your recommendation at 125. But do we need to take the 20% holdback and the 20,000 for the beautification team as separate votes?
I would say, Karen, what do you think?
I'm sorry, I was writing to Jeff about the beautification team. What's your question?
We had two questions, Karen. One being the 20% holdback. Does that need to be carried as a separate vote? And then the 20,000 for the beautification team is another separate vote?
I mean, I think it's up to you. I think that you can vote $20,000 for the beautification team. I think that we have to, what I was just asking Jeff in an email is, maybe we should move forward with the request to fill the positions and see how that's received by the administration and or the selectmen, given the kind of hiring freeze we have. So you vote to pull that out of the budget. The 20% cap, I understand Kyle's point that the 150 may ultimately go towards it. I would make sure what you're working with for 2020 available does take that 20% physical improvement allocation into effect. You can always reallocate
Yeah, and I agree with that.
one
Karen.
budget, but I'd
Yeah,
make sure your 20 budget's square.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
And two quick notes, so on the 2021 projected budget, we have already allocated 20% of the allocation to public improvement expense. That's the 75,855 line item. So we are including the 20% allocation for the public improvement expense.
Yep.
And I mean, you guys can do what you want, but I don't think you necessarily need to take out 20,000 out of anything today. You have in the bank right now, you have over 91,000 available in public
Yeah.
improvement expenses. With the allocation, you'll have 167,000. So you'll have plenty of money for the beautification team if you decide to pursue it.
I agree with Kyle, because I think that if something happens and the positions aren't approved or I don't know what, then you're just going to have to take another vote.
Yeah.
But I
I'm
think
okay
the
with
general understanding is good, and your minutes will reflect this discussion.
Yeah, I'm okay with it, Peter.
Okay, so 120, holding back 24, the beautification team? I'm sorry,
Just so
120
we didn't
125.
have to do that, the only thing that we should hold back is the 20% for public improvements, but we don't need to hold back the beautification team money. There's enough money there.
Okay,
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to say is, you guys have kind of already done that, or we've already done that in the projected budget. If you were to agree to the town's request for 150,000 in the 2021 projected budget, you'd still have 20% allocated to public improvement expense. You'd still have the 90,000 allocated to marketing and promotion. And then after today's reallocation of the unencumbered public improvement expenses, you'd have 134,000 in unallocated.
in the 90 that's on there, how much of that is committed to the chamber?
All of
91.7,
all of
91.7, all of it.
So we would be looking at, I'm wondering about, I want to fund the chamber. That the question was, I want to make sure we meet our obligations as written. What about special events then?
That'd be up for you guys to decide, but you'd have enough money, and you wouldn't have much to do other stuff with an unallocated, but you'd have enough, as it stands right now, if the allocation is voted at town meeting, you'd have enough money to do 100,000 again for special events.
Okay.
That's if we gave them all 134, Kyle.
That's if you what?
If we gave them all 134 of unencumbered, we'd still have enough money from the next round of funding.
Yeah, so you have 134 and unallocated, and you
Right.
could allocate 100,000 to that for projects
Right.
if you wanted.
Okay.
And before moving any of the money around, you are pretty darn close to $100,000.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's
So really it comes down to, Peter, we have $134,000 to play with for the town that's unencumbered or unallocated. They're asking for 150. I think it's a pretty darn good gesture on our part for the town.
Yeah, agreed.
Steve, I'm sorry.
No, I agree. Ken's got it. I agree.
At our last meeting, Peter did request something formally in writing, so I take it that's still a request of this committee.
Yes.
Just good for the documentation.
Mhm.
And Karen, do you know what we're talking about on the terms of the writing?
You're looking for the confirmation from town council that.
Yes, that's one. The other one is if this goes to the DPW, which is who came in, would it all go to the DPW? Or
The
would it,
$150,000?
well, we haven't figured
There's
out.
been no plan presented that gives you a breakdown on where that 150 would go.
It sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, it sounds to me the council, the board.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, Karen. It sounds like the selectmen want the capacity to be able to move these funds around subject to their needs as they determine during the course of the fiscal year.
Correct.
Okay, and at some point in time, if they determine that they need to use the money, that most likely they'll acknowledge beforehand that this money has to be used for our purposes, not our purposes, but to meet legislative purposes, and most likely to be used by DPW, correct?
I don't even want to say the DPW because it could, I mean,
Okay.
DPW covers parks, but
Okay.
beaches.
Yeah, it could be.
Because Rich
You know,
did say it could be used
But
for salaries.
it
or
has to
whatever
be
they-
consistent. However it would be used, I think it would need to be consistent with the tourism fund legislation.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, which is why we're leaning to say the DPW, because when the DPW folks were here, they said we definitely could allocate this towards improvements, public improvements for the town. And I think if they can do that, we're both within what the legislation says we're supposed to do with this money.
Yeah. And I mean, I just want to be clear. I think that wages are of the utmost importance. I think that that's the guidance the selectmen have given is to, save jobs. And clear that it could be people working like the beautification team does.
Not
Public
to,
improvements, not necessarily some kind of physical, it's not a bathhouse or something like that.
but not to make it awkward, but also for someone like Kyle, who's done a tremendous job for us.
It could be Kyle, it could be me.
Right,
It could be Kathy Williams working on the drive-in site.
right.
It could be,
No, Karen, we hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so
Got it.
Peter, Steve, I'm okay with my understanding of how this money is to be used, as well as what Karen just said. I think we want to be able to give them, the select board, the maximum capacity in allocating these funds concurrent with their needs, but also meeting the legislative requirements of the money. And that way, it gives the town manager the ability to, if he needs it for Kyle or Karen, if he needs it for DPW or Parks and Rec, whatever the case may be, that's there. And having said that, if you need something more from either the town council or if the board of selectmen or something, I'm okay with that too. But I'm okay with whatever way we go with.
Right. I think it should come from town council, so we don't violate it, and let the town council say, yeah, this is acceptable. Karen, you're looking bleak. Is that not?
I'm just looking bleak, period. Sorry. Thank
Well,
you,
thank
Peter.
you.
You know how to
Thank
talk to, you womanizer, you.
Thank you for noticing, huh, Peter?
Wow. No, I'm fine, Peter. I think it's fine. I think that this is a great conversation. I think that what I perceive is that the committee's very supportive of this in concept. I think that you would still like to hear the opinions of town council. And we'll, continue to look at the budget to make sure we got the 20% we need and to see what your 2021 line items can really better look like.
We were also told that we could get an formal letter saying that, that we would get this money back when things are better. No, not a note, not anything, but just an understanding.
Yeah, you're looking for like a memorandum of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, not a note, not it has to be paid back by such and such a date, just an MOU.
We can also use the fact that the fund actually, is earmarked like the committee is for both community and tourism. And anything that the DPW does that improves something for the citizens of the town, I would think would be acceptable too. Talking about the 20% for public improvement.
No, your point's very well taken, Jack. Very well taken. 125. I think it's too tight if we go to 150.
Peter, I'd just go with the full 134 of unallocated funds, whatever that number comes back at.
So Ken, just to one point of clarification, the 134 in unallocated funds is assuming the 150 allocation. So you guys really have, 134 plus
We have
150
plenty.
available.
You got lots of money.
There's
What's
plenty
that?
there, right?
Yeah.
The last bit cut out. There was 134 plus what, Kyle?
Plus the 150 is like really what you have projected and unallocated for 2021. The 134 number that I gave you is assuming that the 150 allocation already occurred.
Right.
We're good.
Okay, so we have.
So, I mean, in the simplest form, you guys have enough money to do all this in 2021. Where it's gonna, be an issue is the next year.
Right.
Okay,
It's
well,
going to be an issue no matter what. Whether we give them 125 or we give them 150, it's still going to be an issue.
I would seem that, I think it'd be easy enough to give them 150,000 what we have and what we're going to have. I mean, I don't think that's a reach according to Kyle's figure.
right, Mr. McCormick, would you like to make that as a motion then?
I will. I move that we allocate $150,000 for the benefit of the town's 2021 budget.
Right. Subject to a letter from the town attorney.
Mhm.
You accept that as part of your
Oh,
amendment?
absolutely. Yeah.
Second,
There's a motion and there was a second. Who made the second?
Steve.
Steve?
Steve made the second. There's a motion on the table and there's a second. Any further questions?
Can we ask that an MOU also be added to that, please?
Yes. Jack, will you accept that?
Yeah.
Steve, will you accept that as
Yeah.
part of your second?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And Peter, do we need to, just with the clarification, any previously committed fund authorizations such as the chamber commitment are fully funded?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I just ask the question, do we need to do this vote tonight? When I talked to Rich last night, they weren't even sure they were making a formal request. So to actually have a vote tonight, I don't know if it's necessary. I think knowing that the money's there, if they do come for the requests, and I think the message from Karen, letting them know that we've had this conversation. I'm just curious if the vote is necessary.
Well,
Yeah,
I think it'd be appropriate that we just at least set aside the money, whether they need it or not, and we know it's sitting there, Mary.
Well, I think that's what we've done, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I don't know if it's necessary for the vote.
Okay, Mary, this is new information for me, and if they haven't decided whether they're going to make us an ask, I agree. Maybe we shouldn't make a vote. Let through Karen know that we're ready ready and willing and able, subject to a formal vote. But if they don't, if they're not going to ask, I don't want to give them. Is
I
that a
think
good
that's
way to put
I
it,
think
Mary?
that's a fair point. I'll defer to Karen. Karen, do you have anything
I
that
don't
would?
think you have to vote. I don't, I don't think it needs to be formal. I think I said it just a little bit ago. I mean, what I hear is very open to this. And you'd like to hear from town council. You want to hear about the MOU, and you can go from there.
Yeah.
Mary, good point.
Yeah.
I think I was disagreeing with Mary a moment ago, but I'm thinking about what you just said, and I think it's a good point. Why give it to them if they are not asking at this point? Certainly Kyle and Karen can convey our sentiments to the proper personnel, and at the appropriate time, we can come back and vote. But if you give it to them, they're going to take it. So yeah, let's wait till they ask.
All right, how about I make a table, make a motion, the tables, the motion.
Right. Steve, is that acceptable to you to
Yes,
table the
sir.
motion? Okay.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yep.
So the motion is tabled for right now. Very good. Very good. Anything else on the agenda that we want to discuss? There was some staff updates and stuff.
Do we need a roll call vote now, just to table that?
To table it? Karen, do we need a roll call vote to table it?
I don't know. I mean,
No, the motion
I hate
doesn't
to be a
exist because
stickler.
we didn't vote on the first one. So
We
the
didn't vote on, yeah, we didn't vote on the original motion, so I guess we're all set.
I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, Kyle, you're just gonna say in the minutes that it was extensively discussed.
All right.
Hey, if I could,
Betcha
Peter,
he's already got the minutes done.
Steve, yes, sir.
yeah, I just want to make this point, just to follow up with what Mary just said a moment ago, but this is really to Kyle and Karen. Keep us apprised. Sometimes it might go, I've seen this happen to me before, it gets deep into the fiscal year before the board might decide to come back and say, by the way, we do need that money. I guess what I'm trying to say, we should know, hopefully, before we start planning for FY 2021, give us some time, ample time to plan for FY 21 if they're going to use our money, that's all.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Will do.
Yep. Roger that.
Okay, thanks.
And again, once we figure out what's going to happen, and once we have a good idea what's going to happen for fiscal year 22, we're going to need to tell the people that we've been funding, meaning the 100,000, may not be there, or may be there in a much reduced amount, because the
Yeah.
money just will not be there.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting at.
Yeah, and you guys can probably get that point across when you go through the event process for this year. Kind of let
Right.
them know, we have it for this year, but don't rely on it for next year.
I think a lot of them already know.
Yeah, they're not dumb.
They know where the money comes from.
all right.
Committee member updates.
Just a quick one. Obviously, we've been having Zoom meetings with the commission also. An executive committee meeting last Thursday, I made a motion to extend the current officers for an additional 6 months due to the COVID virus. And so we're going to present that to the full commission next Thursday, a week from this coming Thursday. And I assume that will be accepted.
Right. You get the feeling that will be accepted, or too hard to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does. I don't think there'll be any question. I mean, we've been pushing stuff through the committee about the election of officers for the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So why come into compliance now?
Well, I gotta tell you, at the next meeting, I forget, it must be the 28th. When this is put forward, I'm gonna remind all the committee members that we've been plowing some new ground here, because when I came on the commission, it was understood that the chairman and vice chairman would serve 1 year and were not eligible for succession. And that didn't change until couple of years back. I think it was 2018.
Hmm.
Up until that time, I was the last one-year chairman in FY14. Dick Roy from Dennis took it over for 15 and 16. And Woody Mitchell from Sandwich took it over for 17 and 18. And in 18, they decided to make the president's, the chairman and the vice chairman's tenure for 2 years. And then they voted to make it retroactive. So Woody had a 3rd year and then a 4th year, and now he's going to have an additional 6 months. So I thought 6 months was enough for him.
Joanne, you got any pearls of wisdom for us?
The planning board planning board met last 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, and the South Yarmouth Wise Living Retirement Community was up again for one in a series of approvals and presentations that they have to go through. This was the second one with us. We had a public hearing 2 weeks before that. But last week's meeting was a request from them that we support their request to the Zoning Board of Appeals for relief. They need relief in a couple of areas on the project, and we were fully supportive of them. They are, as you can imagine, the site requirements and design requirements for something that's new would have gables and interesting architecture and wouldn't look like the motels look like on 28. Straight back, narrow, 2 rooms wide. There's only so much that Wise Living can do to dress up the east and west facades of the building. So they're doing their best, but they need some relief from the Zoning Board of Appeals on the look. And we agreed that that was a reasonable request since this is a reuse of an existing structure. They also asked for a variance they're going to be asking a variance to have 2 signs instead of 1 because the property is actually 2 establishments and not just 1. There's an existing one there that has, as all of you know, was the old, not Elks, but
Boost Club.
Moose, same family. And in there is a thrift shop and a hairdresser and things like that. And they will be able to retain, we supported their request to retain an extra sign there. So anyway, the bottom line was we support all of their requests for relief from the ZBA, and we memorialize that in a letter to the ZBA and a vote. And that was the main thing on the agenda last week. 2 weeks ago.
Kyle? Karen?
Oh, and the only other thing that
sorry.
mentioned on capital budget, actually, this was mentioned at our last meeting. Just like the 150 from here, the entire allocation of 1.5 million from capital budget is in suspense. And that has been moved to this funding category, similar to where our 150,000 will rest. And in addition, 2 other appropriations that normally we review for roadways and wastewater management, mostly sewers. It's an allocation for sewers, not the big wastewater. Those 2 have been pushed to the side. So that's almost $3 million that has been in suspense for the fiscal 21 year that will be used to fund other needs in the budget. That's all I have.
Kyle? Karen? Staff updates?
Yeah, in your packet, we included a letter from Town Planner Kathy Williams regarding regulatory relief for businesses, COVID-19 related. So the town of Barnstable had sent a pretty nice letter to the state about, outdoor seating for restaurants, things of that nature. Basically, they're asking the state for more flexibility at the local level to do some temporary regulations to maybe allow for additional outdoor seating capacity. So Kathy drafted up a letter that's, Karen, I think it's going to be presented to the Board of Selectmen tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on the agenda tonight. So the gist of it is the Barnstable letter was great. And it was really just around ABCC stuff, the liquor licensing. And we just wanted to raise the point, and I don't know exactly what regulations we would need to change, but to the extent possible, if there's anything, sign regulations, entertainment licensing, that kind of thing, that authority be delegated to the local level wherever needed. So.
I would think maybe, Mary, you would have a line on this. For a lot of restaurants, the only way that they may survive is if they can add additional seating capacity outside to at least supplement the reduction of seating inside. And there are all sorts of rules and regulations to have outside premises. I'm not sure if they're state or local regulations, but
There's
is that
state
part of
laws,
what this
Joanne.
package is?
Yeah, I mean, Joanne, I'll jump in there, being in the
Yeah.
restaurant business. The outside dining food service areas, you all fall under local Board of Health Authority, but there's state ABC regulations that they're referring to as far as designation of seating and service area and, clear delineation of what, where somebody can sit and have a drink and where they can't. And you're only allowed so much capacity, et cetera, outside pursuant to your liquor license, whatever your capacity is indoors. And I don't know the formula off the top of my head. So it's great that, Barnstable and Yarmouth are trying to get ahead of the game. We've been actually reaching out to the town of Sandwich for the exact same reason, because we do need relief from this. Without being able to expand our outdoor capacities, and for everything that we're hearing from the restaurant standpoint, is that at best over the summer months we'll be at 50% capacity. The margins in restaurant business, you have a better shot of putting your money in a CD. So, the bottom line is this, is we need all the relief we can get to make the restaurant business continue to be viable. So I fully support what the town of Yarmouth is trying to do for Yarmouth, and hopefully there'll be relief across the board for all towns.
Well, if I can tell you, I talked to Jack Units right before the call today or this meeting, and he's feeling fairly confident that the lieutenant governor is going to take action to support the relief for the restaurants and hotels. So
The lieutenant governor has a house in Yarmouth, so I would see that she would. So.
Yeah, she would. And I also just want to say, Kyle, Karen, and Kathy and the chamber, we were in conversation about this weeks ago. And so they were right on top of it. They were listening to what the business owners were telling us here in Yarmouth, and people are trying to be as creative as possible. They're looking across the world what people have done, and they're thinking about what they can do. So
yeah, the bottom line is this, guys, whether capacity numbers or not, you got to give people the reason to come to the Cape. Our economy is so strongly tied to the tourism business. If we don't give them a reason and a place to eat when they come here, they're not going to come here. And these numbers that we were talking about today are going to pale in comparison to what we're looking at a year from now. So,
Yeah.
So it doesn't really apply to the town, or it could. The town of Newbury is closing off part of Main Street to traffic, so that there'll be seating in the street. Provincetown's talking about, maybe cutting down one lane off of Commercial Street, but a lot of Commercial Street's one lane anyways. So I don't know what they're going to do there.
Yeah.
But anything to increase the capacity of the restaurants, because as you said, restaurants don't make a whole lot of money, and especially when they're trying to work off of a 10-week season.
Yeah, 50% seating capacity.
Yeah. Okay, that was fun.
Yeah.
One other quick staff update is that the Board of Selectmen will be discussing special events tonight too. Karen's going to be, or just events on town property. Karen's going to be presenting that tonight. They got to figure out what they want to do for all these events that have been scheduled through the end of the summer. And we actually have a couple event organizers who are interested in using the drive-in site. One guy wants to do drive-in movies. Another guy wants to do drive-in concerts with drive-in movies during the week. But we haven't really gotten too far in discussions with those event organizers because first we need to see what the selectmen have to say about events throughout the summertime. But just as an FYI to you guys, there certainly is a lot of interest in the drive-in site, given our current conditions.
Well, the drive-in site, if you're going to a drive-in, you're in a car, so you're automatically separated and stuff.
Yeah.
And how they're going to do the audio. This would be great if the Wi-Fi were already set up there. You could do audio through the Wi-Fi.
Right.
They'll broadcast over your radio in your car like they used to do.
Yep.
Only $1,600 for it, so
That's how much, Mary?
$1,600 to $1,900 for the transponder, so it comes over the radio.
Sure money in comparison.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope that the town doesn't cancel everything right through some towns have already closed everything down for the rest of this calendar year, which
Yeah.
I think is a little premature since we don't even know what the next month is going to bring us. So
Yeah, I think the town of Barnstable is doing it the best way where they're taking it in 30-day windows because it's tough to plan beyond that.
right.
Provincetown's canceled everything through Carnival, which is August.
Right.
Well, while we're on the drive-in site, has anyone heard from Fifth Dimension from the town staff?
We got a signed contract back from them. We're getting the applicable town parties to sign it right now. And then once that's signed, he's going to go ahead and start.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Okay, maybe we can get an update for our next meeting, Kyle?
Yeah. I'm not sure, like, once the contract's fully signed, I'm not sure what his timeline is on being able to get out here.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get you an update at the next meeting.
I just want to let you know, per a conversation with Karen, Aaron and I, who's the owner of Fifth Element, and I are emailing back and forth about the drive-in site. Nothing major, but just some basic questions about it.
Good. Excellent.
Any other staff updates?
No, just apologies. I forgot to put the minutes in the packet. I've actually have them done, but I just didn't put them in the packet. So we'll have to bump that off to your next meeting.
Okay. Upcoming meeting is June 11th.
Correct.
That works for everybody?
Yep.
Mary, can you and/or your dog do number 6?
You're on mute.
Muted, Mary.
Oh, she's disappeared. Mary.
She's there, but she's got to unmute.
She's on mute.
No, she obviously can't hear us.
There she is.
Just trying to make sure the dog doesn't come back. It's small on the boat. She follows me. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is there a second? Kyle, do we need to do a roll call on that, or can we assume that everybody votes in favor?
You're supposed to do a roll call. All votes must be taken by roll call.
All right, so we'll do it. Ken,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes?
Jack,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Peter, yes. Did I miss anybody?
Mary.
Mary,
I made the motion, but yes.
all right. We'll see you guys on the 11th. And
Take care.
Karen and or Kyle, if you